What's going on, everybody? Zachariah, Kaine enabled. So June 2021 marks the 20-year anniversary of the Fast and the Furious being released, the original. For me, the entire franchise holds a significant place in my heart because it's rooted in family, and it's like some of the best family memories I have in general. I remember day one sneaking up to the Regal Cinema on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. My brother had been there from opening time until closing time. He watched the movie literally 5 times in a row. He snuck me into the back door. The first scene I seen was Dom and Brian, the Supra and the Charger racing at the end. Watched the entire movie again, left, and from that moment, I fell in love with street racing, and my brother was my introduction into that. But with all that being said, though, you may find it hard to believe that I've never,
And the rock means
ever played any of the Fast and Furious video games. It's crazy to think, and this is, at the time of Fast and Furious, I had my first paycheck. I bought Need for Speed Carbon limited edition and Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus. No idea why I bought that game, but I bought that game. But anyways, I don't know how I missed Fast and Furious. My brother swears we've played it and we just didn't like it. I genuinely don't remember. Maybe he played it and I didn't. So today we're going to roll this out in a series of videos, starting with the first entry, the PlayStation 2 Fast and the Furious. A little lens glare there for you. We're going to dive in. We're going to find out if this game is good, if I enjoyed it, if it's worth it, and go from there. So with that being said, Zachariah, Kaine enabled, and let's go. The year is 2006, and the American street racing scene is still riding the high garnered off mainstream exposure. Maybe not as high as years prior, mainly due to that 2001 cult classic The Fast and the Furious, bringing underground import street racing to the forefront of Americana pop culture, but still high enough to force video game developers to consider expanding on this style of racing as a main plot and selling point for their titles. Fresh off the heels of EA's massively popular trifecta Need for Speed Underground 1, Underground 2, and Most Wanted, which did for video games what the original, and to a lesser degree the second Fast and Furious movie did for cinema, making a left turn from simulation-style track racers like Gran Turismo and Forza Motorsports, and doubling down on the gritty, more real-life style street racing depicted in the F&F movies, right down to the cheesy story plots. This stretch proved to be EA's most lucrative ever, bringing them second on the all-time list for racing franchises, only 2 million shy of the Mario Kart juggernaut. With all that being said, still, surprisingly enough, it took 5 years from the initial movie release for an actual Fast and Furious branded video game to be released commercially on consoles, as Bandai Namco elected to be the head of that spear leading the charge. Now there was another being developed in 2003 by Genki, but unfortunately it was cancelled way before its release. However, Namco was no stranger to this style of game, with the current Fast game being considered a spiritual successor to their 2004 release SRS Street Racing Syndicate, which featured the same cheesy story plots and street racing mechanics as its main competition, Need for Speed Underground 2. And so it was, as the Fast and Furious was released in September of 2006 in North America and March of 2007 in Europe, and was immediately met with a universal grade of mediocre, with popular game coverage outlets like IGN and Game Informer giving it a 6 out of 10. But anybody who knows me knows I never use video game scores to help me decide whether I'm going to buy a game or not, especially when that game revolves around a franchise near and dear to my heart. Now obviously I can't go back in time to the release of the game, but what I can do is compare and contrast this game to similar themed games around the time, note what it does right, what it did wrong, and if this journey was worth it or not. As previously mentioned, The Fast and Furious was released for PlayStation 2 in late 2006 in North America and 2007 in Europe, published by Bandai Namco. Now let's take a look at the racing titles in circulation at that time. First, the gold standards in simulation style racing. The original Forza Motorsports still had its audience after its 2005 release on the original Microsoft Xbox, as Forza Motorsports 2 was prepping a release in May of 2007 on Microsoft's next generation console, the Xbox 360. The flip of this coin, Sony's juggernaut IP Gran Turismo was seemingly at a crossroads. More than 2 years removed from the release of Gran Turismo 4 on Sony's PlayStation 2, Polyphony Digital had already turned its attentions to next generation releases, prepping for the Gran Turismo 5 Prologue, which released on Sony's PlayStation 3 in late 2007. Now these weren't the only simulation racing games around, with IPs like Ford Racing and Toka sticking around for the sake of competition and variety. Now to the arcade style, and like I said before, we were still in the whole street racing craze, so naturally there were plenty of games to mirror this. Getting it out of the way from the top was EA's mammoth Need for Speed franchise, which gambled on the subgenre in 2003, straying away from previous NFS titles that focused on a more simulation arcadey hybrid, focusing on a lot of scenic lap-based races, as well as modes revolving around police evasion, which was the main focal point of the 2002 release Hot Pursuit 2. These games almost always revolved around 8 to 10 supercars, so we're talking your Lamborghinis, Ferraris, etc. Now see, these games weren't bad, but truthfully, if I get to the point in the game where I'm forced to drive a Bugatti Veyron to win a race, I almost always bail on it before I even beat the story. I just lose interest. It's not something that entertains me. But with the release of Underground in 2003, EA immediately knew they were onto something, following it up with 2004's Underground 2, Most Wanted in 2005, and my personal favorite, Carbon in 2006, all further expanding the vehicle personalization and street racing underworld. And that circles back around to why I didn't care about previous NFS titles. Instead of starting with picks like a Porsche 911 or a Dodge Viper, from Underground to Carbon, players were typically greeted with choices like Honda Civics and Nissan 240SXs. A more realistic approach to an entry-level street racer. Outside of the NFS series, franchises like Test Drive, Burnout, and Project Gotham Racing were also in the street racing aesthetic. On top of the aforementioned Namco title Street Racing Syndicate and my two personal introductions into the street racing video game world, Genki's Tokyo Extreme Racer franchise, first released in North America in 1999 on the Sega Dreamcast. However, my first entry was the 2001 North American release Tokyo Extreme Racer Zero on the PS2. And Rockstar's published Midnight Club series, which first hit in 2002 on the PlayStation 2. The former of which hit with me, in my opinion, and spoilers, the absolute best street racing game when they shifted gears into the next generation of consoles, releasing Import Tuner Challenge on the 360 in 2006. Bigger, better, badder. This was literally, in my opinion, the best street racing game of that generation. The racing market clearly had plenty of fish to choose from, all based on user preferences. Fans of endurance race laps based around revolving track style maneuvers and pit stops, you stuck with Forza or GT. Want to have some unrealistic fun that borderline blends racing and destruction derby style crash mechanics and a mad dash to a checkered flag? Well, you got Burnout and Vigilante 8. But for me, and for many other people, that underground street racing style was unmatched. For the same reason Batman's my favorite superhero, Slice of Life is my favorite type of anime, the street racing world is rooted in practical reality, at least to a pre-teenage me, fantasizing about my car as a kid and how I'd like to take it from a bucket to a beast. Playing these style of games and literally being able to do that, it just felt more realistic. And that's not to take away from more simulation style games like Gran Turismo. Like I said, I didn't see myself being the next Mario Andretti. I saw myself being the next Takumi Fujiwara. Now we get to the Fast and the Furious. Diving straight into the story, I noticed the first law, unfortunately, and it's one that almost every game in the genre suffers from to that time and this day, honestly. Dropping into the story, players are immediately thrown into someone else's car, which is already fully upgraded and tricked out to the max. And personally, I hate it when they do this. When games do this to me, it just comes off as lazy. How they paint these games, it's almost like the player has never been behind the wheel of a car, but the someone else in question, who's often the narrator, tutorial, or your bro throughout the game, they for whatever reason have a gut feeling that you're the sickest street racer of all time. So they let you take their baby for a joyride, typically beating a race or two, losing that car, and being forced to pick from the game's starting choices. And the argument now, see, I try to listen to the voice of reason when this is done. I understand that developers attempt to hook the player as soon as they get a touch of the controller, thinking that if a player is immediately forced to choose one of them bone stock Ford Focuses or Toyota Celicas, the player may bail before they get a chance to get into the actual meat of the game. But to me, that's what exhibition races are for. To get those in-game cars the first playthrough, to get a feel for the game and its driving controls. And in the same vein, with this game revolving heavily around the third movie Tokyo Drift, I also realized that Han did the exact same thing, letting the main character, a troubled kid from America, ship to Tokyo to live with his dad, Sean Boswell, drive his Nissan Silvia S15 through a parking garage for a drift battle with another racer only minutes after their first interaction. I understand it, still doesn't make it any less annoying. See, this is a tried and true trope and one that developers go to frequently, so complaining about it does no good. But for instance, in the 2015 reboot in the Need for Speed franchise, the player exists in the world long before their interactions with the players in the story, already owning a souped-up Fox body Mustang, and the reason given behind we're made to choose from a new stock of cars to pick from is that in order to join this crew, we had to do a new project build. Again, this ain't much better because if I already own one of the fastest cars on the streets, why in the world would I want to bother to impress anybody or join their crew? But at least it was a little bit different. This is just a super long-winded way for me to say that the Underground games and many other games before this did the same kind of introduction as Fast and Furious. It's something that I just have never been able to get into. The Tokyo Extreme Racers franchise, they did it right in my opinion. You don't have a car, you just have a set amount of money. Go buy a car, race, upgrade, rinse, repeat. Now, the number one most important aspect of all racing games, the control of the car, of course, right? The game definitely hangs its hat on the drifting aspect being its main focus. The first collection of races feature the typical point A to point B top speed battles down the Wangan while little to no technique is needed, just upgrade your ride and run. But where the game shines is also, in my opinion, where it could go over the heads of a lot of typical racing game fans. The drift portions are truly meant for people who know more than just the average racing gamer. In other games like NFS Carbon, drifting is more or less a one-button motion. You get in a car, slide through a turn by holding a joystick one way or the other, and you feather the gas. It's a simplified entry-level way to get gamers to feel like they know their stuff. But Fast and Furious is anything but simplified. There's a reason the drift tutorial spans over several regions. Much like in real life, this game has more than just one executed drift. Feints, braking drifts, clutch kick drifts, power overs, side brakes, consies, manjis. The list just goes on. And at the beginning, this was honestly overwhelming for me, but by the end, I understood how to differentiate hairpins from bends and what drift techniques to use on each corner. This did take some time, but it definitely feels earned once you work on maneuvering and you crank off one of them 4-figure drifts late in the game. Now, that's not to say this game is perfect when it comes to controls either. For whatever reason, the walls in this game are the most troublesome thing you'll ever face, far harder than any opponent in the game. If you blast into any one of these walls in the race at any point, it's nearly impossible to get off of the wall without first coming to a complete dead stop. You'll just keep riding the wall at the guardrail, losing speed the whole time. This happened to me so much that I actually Googled it, saw threads full of this same complaint. It's so notorious that it actually has its own name. It's called magnet walls, which is pretty much spot on. It's almost like the walls hold your car. You can turn the wheel as much as you like, but this car's not going to move. It's definitely a flaw that can trash an entire race in just one bad turn. Another annoying part of this game's mechanics or controls, more or less on the mechanics side, is the drift races themselves. It seems like every single opponent in the game has literally no idea what a drift is as long as you keep them within your line of sight. If you can see their car on your screen while you're drifting, you'll obliterate them. But if they manage to pull ahead even just one turn out of your view, their score shoots up literally thousands of points like they just pulled off the most epic drift of all time. And they went from trailing you by a couple hundred points to them now leading by over 10,000. And this wasn't just a one-off thing. This literally happened every single time I would watch my score go from being thousands ahead to being literally thousands and thousands behind. As soon as you lose them, it's literally like they turned into the DK himself. I guess I could feel different about this if I'd be able to go view a replay and watch them actually crank a drift off, but I just feel like it's just the game's way of keeping competition alive, and it's just kind of cheap in my opinion. Now on to another of the biggest selling points to any racing game, vehicle selection and personal customization options. Vehicle selection is good as, if not better than most of the competition at the time. The biggest flaw for me I've always felt that I've held against the early Midnight Club games was the lack of actual vehicles. Instead of S2000s, Escorts, and Civics, there were Cocottes and Ternas and Cities. Lookalikes to the real-life cars, but with slight alterations on the names and looks. I always hated this. This is common practice for Rockstar though, with the Grand Theft Auto series being the prime example of this. I'm not sure why, but the lack of true licensed vehicles has always just honestly taken me out of games a little bit. But when it comes to Fast and Furious, this game features probably one of the most in-depth vehicle rosters of all time, at least on the street racing side of the spectrum. And when it comes to customization, I honestly cannot think of another game that offers the level of depth and customization that Fast and Furious offers, truthfully. Games like Underground typically featured a few name brand aftermarkets like Grady and HKS, but Fast and Furious goes all out. Multiple aftermarket brands for every single part of a car. The option to do genuine motor swaps, plus various types of transmission and differential swaps, each beneficial in one aspect of the game that another may lack. You don't just upgrade everything to level 5. Some upgrades are made faster acceleration with a sacrifice on top speed, and others redline through those gears a lot harder to optimize max horsepower, but the launch speed is greatly reduced. I love that variety. It makes it feel unlike any other racing game of the generation, and it requires more thought when gearing up for that next big battle. And another cool thing about this is being developed by Bandai Namco, the game also includes decals, drifter charms, and stickers featuring Namco's other intellectual properties like Pac-Man, Tekken, and Soul Calibur. There's LED light valve stems, colored nitrous purges, and so much more. The customization in this game is a league of its own, I'm dead serious. For any true fan of the entire tuner scene or just somebody who's trying to make their car look like their car, Fast and Furious provides way more than enough variety to make this possible. The story definitely is the biggest issue with this entire game for me. There simply isn't a story. No plot, no interactions, nothing. The voice you hear at the beginning is one of 6 or 7 voiceovers in the entire game. Outside of the voice of legendary professional drifter Daijiro Yoshihara giving pointers on how to execute specific drifts, there simply is no plot, no cutscenes outside of the introduction of each boss, which is more or less a 5-second pan around to their car. The biggest offender to me is defeating the Drift King, who is set up to be the game's big boss apparently. Well, there's another crew after him. Once you beat them, all you get is this single page text scroll that just says, "You win, you're the best in Tokyo." I mean, it literally was just like, wow. Credits roll, game over. Now that's not just dumping on the entire story mode, because honestly, the story mode does have a saving grace in my opinion. It includes many of the Fast and Furious characters we've come to love over the years. Brian O'Connor, Dominic Toretto, Han, Neela, DK, and so many more raceable opponents throughout the maps and the territories. And on top of the Fast cast, there's also inclusions of many real-world F1 and drift racers. But hands down, my favorite inclusion is the subtle nod to one of my favorite animes of all time, Initial D, which revolves around Takumi Fujiwara and his panda Trueno. The game bounces back and forth between straight line and drag style races and toga drift style races. In the first drift region called the Doshi, the first crew's name is Kanzai. Each racer in this crew is a tip of the cap to that anime. First is a blue WRX STI with a driver named Masako. This is a double reference, at least to me, with the main character Takumi Fujiwara's father Bunta also owning a blue Subaru Impreza STI, and the second, the name Masako, is either a combination of an alternate driver Mako and her co-pilot Sayuki, or just simply an alteration on Mako Sato's name herself, just switching around a letter or two. Mako drives a blue Lady in the anime. The next car in the crew is 11, driven by Takumi's best friend Itsuki Takeuchi in the show. I can't find any significance on the name of the driver for the 11, Katsuhiro, but the car is undoubtedly Takeuchi's. Next to the 11 is the main man, Takumi Fujiwara. Well, at least his AE86, with the carbon fiber hood and the panda paint job to match. This one really bummed me out when I saw the name Hiroto and not Takumi. This feeling faded honestly almost immediately though when I panned to the next racer in the region and saw the name Ryosuke attached to a yellow FDRX7. As well as the crew's boss, a white FCRX7 driven by Kyosuke. Ryosuke and Keisuke, the first names of the Takahashi brothers, who, without giving away too many spoilers of the show, are both major characters throughout the entire series. Although in the show, Ryosuke drives the FC and Keisuke whips the FD. Nevertheless, that tip of the cap that undoubtedly influenced the drift-heavy concept of the third movie and this game honestly made this game so much better for me. After beating the game, you can still free roam drive, there are roll-up races, and there are a set amount of racers throughout the game that you have to defeat. I literally spent hours after defeating the final boss trying to find the last 2. I ended up racing them, and this game did this bizarre glitch for me. So the main thing about roll-up races is you get 200 meters ahead, you win the race. I started both of these races against the 2 people I needed to get 100% completion, and I blew them out of the water. And for whatever reason, the game made me the loser. I have no idea why. Something messed up in the game's code somewhere, and it treated me being in the lead as me losing. I have no idea what happened. But I didn't really feel the need to keep hunting those guys down. They disappeared after I lost, quote unquote. So I said, hey, you know what? I beat the game. Didn't go back for those last 2. I couldn't care less. There's no chance for me to go back and find them, and there's honestly no real replay value with the game. Once you beat the story mode, which shouldn't take you more than 4 or 5 hours once mastering drifting, there's no point in playing it. Other than to have it on the shelf, it's pretty much a done deal for me. Now, would I have been bummed had I played it back in the day? Of course not. I think back in the day, this game would have been very difficult for me. The drifting aspect would have blown my head completely off. I have no idea how I would have reacted to it. I probably would have passed the controller to my big brother, let him do all the drifting, and I just did the straightaway races. I can say I'm not upset that I missed it, but I'm also kind of bummed out that I took this long to play it, because it's actually a very solid game. Graphically, it's very good looking. It's enjoyable to play. The story mode definitely is it hurts that it's not fleshed out. It does suck. But almost the same thing could be said with games like Tokyo Extreme Racer. The cool thing about the Tokyo Extreme Racer series is there are these roaming racers like this where you pull up, race a guy, and he'll either accept or deny your races. You know, some racers will only accept very specific, guidelines as far as the races are concerned. Some guys will only race you if you're in a Toyota. Some guys will only race you if you're front wheel drive. Some guys will only race you if you're mid engine. And it doesn't actively tell you how to figure out how to race that racer. It's a pretty neat little side thing. That's a tangent I could go on because, like I said, Import Tuner Challenge, to me, graphically and mechanically is just perfection. But we're talking about Fast and Furious today. A very good game, very slept on. I'm bummed out that I missed it over time, but I'm glad I'm finally able to tackle it now when I've got a brain well enough to formulate a thought on just how good the game is. Would I recommend it? Truthfully, yes. To anybody that can stand PlayStation 2 style controls. If you enjoyed the Need for Speed series, Midnight Club, you'll like the Fast and Furious game for the PlayStation 2. Definitely something I wish we could have experienced, and had more meaning as kids, that brotherly thing. Again, life changes, you grow up, and people part ways, and it sucks, and you can't be a kid forever. But it's important to have memories to hang on to. And then, I can get a little deep with things like Fast and Furious, but I'm serious. Like, on a level that it isn't to most people, it's significant to me by the family bond, because my family is the bond. That's what I remember experiencing it with first, wanting to be that crew with my brothers. Life goes a different way sometimes, but Fast and Furious on the PlayStation 2, fun game to play, highly recommended. Honestly, there's a lot of games to select in that console generation, but that's definitely a pretty good one. Next, we will be looking at the Fast and Furious Showdown for PlayStation 3. I can only imagine. No idea what to expect. Like, subscribe, comment, share. However you see fit to show support. I always appreciate every single bit of it. Thank you so much. It may seem like sometimes I don't care. I promise I do. And I hope to see you back here for the next one. Fast and Furious Showdown. But for now, we will bid you adieu. Fast and Furious. See you guys in the next one.